Okay, well, greetings, Shantena. It's lovely to
Thank you, Thomas.
meet you here at the Castle of the Muses
It's
and to
lovely
welcome
be
you
here.
from Cordoba, where you live.
Quite a place here.
Thank you. And your place in Spain is pretty amazing, where I came to that conference on process and pilgrimage recently. And so tell me a bit about your background, and start with your name, because you're Italian but living in Spain, aren't you?
Yes.
So tell us where you came from in Italy and what your name
My
means.
birth name is Augusto Sabbadini.
Right.
Jewish father, Catholic mother.
Wow.
Sabbadini is a typical Jewish name.
Italian Jewish.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know how far going back? Where was the family from?
I don't know very far back. They came from Venice, sometimes in the 19th century.
Right.
But how they got there and when, what's the story before that?
You didn't go
I
back
don't
and
know.
trace them?
No.
No. I've been to the Jewish ghetto in Venice.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I went to the synagogue there once. Have you been there?
We had, when I was a child, a couple of cousins of my father, I think, were living there and visiting us regularly, and had a special atmosphere and a special charm for me. Also, they would always bring us a suitcase full of toys, which were not like technological plastic toys, were like handmade wooden objects. Yeah.
Right. Right. And so, where did you grow up? Which part of Italy?
I grew up in Milan, which I never liked really as a city.
The Duomo, you know the
Duomo,
cathedral.
the Duomo's fine.
It's nice around there, yeah.
It's maybe the only good thing in Milan.
Right. And you were educated there?
I was educated there. I would have liked to study philosophy, but at the time, having a scientific high school, you could only choose between the sciences, and physics seemed to me the closest
to philosophy. Okay, so you specialised in physics?
Yeah. Yes.
At school even?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was your father's profession? Was he
He was self-made small industrialist, a chemist.
Oh, okay.
By training and
right.
by
So he's a sort of
training.
scientist working with industry,
practical,
factory.
practical application.
Right. And so, but your mother was a Catholic, did she?
Yeah.
So you had both faiths in your background?
Not really. I had the Catholic faith because my father was an atheist, so I didn't care. And my mother was a fairly devout Catholic in a rather simple way.
Lighting candles and going to mass and things. Yeah.
So up to the age of 14, I was a Catholic. A rather tormented soul.
Who isn't? So what year was
And
this?
at the age of 14, when I started studying philosophy at school, I decided that the Christian story was just one amongst many possible ways of telling the story.
Right.
And this notion of a God watching me from above was not necessarily a reliable story.
Right. Had you read any of the Bible as part of your
just
upbringing?
what the ordinary schoolboy is exposed to.
Which isn't very much.
Not very.
Never read it properly.
No.
So what year were you born, if you don't mind?
1943.
During the war?
Which was,
wow.
one of the worst years of the war.
I was in Monte Cassino last year on a pilgrimage, and I think the battle was raging around then.
That's right.
So your parents, I mean, because Mussolini didn't, he He didn't persecute the Jews as much as Hitler, did he? But he didn't...
That's right. So actually the hard time came in September 1943.
When the Germans took over.
Germans took over. And my father, he was smart enough or had enough foresight to buy a house on Lake Como.
Oh, okay.
Near the border with Switzerland.
Right.
And
you moved up there.
In September 1943, he walked across the mountains into Switzerland.
When the Germans were taking over.
When the Germans were taking over.
So he got out.
He got out. Yeah.
And you were already a baby. You were born there.
Yeah. I stayed with my mother. They were not officially married.
Right.
But everyone knew that I was the son of this Jew who had escaped.
Right.
So my mother was quite worried.
Scared.
She lived like quite tense.
Expecting a knock on the door type thing.
Right. Yeah.
But you were okay.
I was okay.
They didn't get
actually,
you.
Yeah. I had all this big garden for myself, and I've kind of
so that's
good
where
memories.
Yeah, Lake Como. I know Lake Garda a little.
Yeah.
Riva del Garda. It's the same kind of landscape. It's beautiful.
Yeah. It's a narrower lake, very deep.
Right.
With lots of big villas from 18th century, 19th century.
It's beautiful.
Along the shore.
Isn't Ascona up there?
Ascona is on the northern tip of Lago Maggiore, which is the third major lake.
Okay, this is the
Maggiore,
three.
Como, and Garda.
Right. And so, because the Eranos Foundation, they meet up there, don't they, in
Yes.
Ascona?
Yes.
Yeah. And you've been involved with that for a long time, haven't
I was involved with that from 94
Right.
to 2002.
Okay. What, going to their annual things there?
Well,
Conferences?
more than that, I was actually part of the team there, organizing the conferences
Oh, okay.
and occasionally lecturing. at the
Right.
conference.
Do they have like a centre there? They have a library, offices?
They do. They have a library and offices.
Oh, okay. Is it, what kind of scale are we talking about? Big or?
The place is not big. It's 3 old houses.
Right.
Each one maybe the size of this house.
Right.
The library had I couldn't really estimate how many volumes, but maybe 10,000, 20,000 volumes.
That's what we have here in the castle,
Right.
to give you an idea.
Yeah, it could be the same order of magnitude. Part of it came to me when Rudolf Ritsema died. He had been the president of the foundation
Oh, right.
for many years, and he became a very close friend, kind of a father figure.
Oh,
to me.
okay.
Yeah.
Was he a sinologist?
He didn't consider himself a sinologist, but he studied Chinese quite in depth.
Right.
Basically, just out of love for I Ching.
Right.
He fell in love with I Ching at a very young age, and found in
As one
like
does,
his, yeah.
Where was he from?
Holland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Ritsema is Friesel, I think. Maybe.
Did you meet Giles Quispel?
No, I've seen pictures of him. And
He's a scholar that always impressed me since I discovered his Jungian commentary on the Book of Revelations of St. John years ago, which I lent to a friend who was a Franciscan novice and never got it back. But anyway, Giles Quispel was he was a great expert on Gnosticism and a friend of Jung's, and he gave the Gospel of Thomas to Jung, I think, because the Queen of the Netherlands had got him a pass to the Coptic Museum in Cairo, where they have all these ancient manuscripts, and he'd found the Gospel of Thomas hiding away in there. And the Queen of the Netherlands went on record at the end of her life saying that was the most important thing she'd ever done for humanity.
wow.
Getting the Gospel of Thomas
Excellent.
into the public domain.
So that
Through
that's
Giles
actually,
Quispel.
all right.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And I didn't know much about him. I mean, I've always, fascinated by his researches. And when I went to the Vatican Library last year, I got a reader's ticket. and I spent a couple of days in paradise studying away. In the Vatican Library they have the entire contents of a series published by Brill of Leiden University.
Interesting, because Rudolf Ritsema worked for Brill before coming to Eranos in Leiden.
Well, he's probably set the thing up then, didn't he? So what was he? Was he a New Testament scholar, or what was his field?
He was he was actually an ancient Eastern text scholar.
Oh, well, he probably set up the series I'm talking about, because it was called something like It's now about 50 different volumes, or maybe 100, and it was the world's leading scholars on Near Eastern texts, Gnostic texts, Coptic texts, and Manichaean texts. And they're reprinting with new editions things like commentaries on the Gospel of Thomas and all the Manichaean scripts that they keep finding in Central Asia.
Yeah. I don't really know about his connection with that series, but he was for quite a few years buying and selling libraries for Brill.
Oh, blimey, what a great job!
Yeah, he was in touch with these extraordinary scholarly gentlemen,
right?
Who had amazing
collections around the world,
and usually.
And what would he do once he bought them?
Castle.
Where did they go?
They would go to Brill. They had quite a remarkable collection of ancient books,
but they're a publishing company, right?
Yeah, also.
And they've got a private library of esoteric stuff.
Yeah.
Have you been in the library?
No, I've never been.
You never got in? Oh my God, I'll have to put it on my list.
I met Rudolf years later.
Okay. Yeah, so just to finish,
Yeah.
just to say, it's in parenthesis to your story.
Yeah.
When I was in the Vatican Library and found all these books, one of the volumes they published was an homage to Giles Quispel, because he died, and I didn't even know he was dead until I saw it in the book. And he died after a day's studying in the Coptic Museum in Cairo. It's a scholar's death, right?
Yeah.
He was on his way home and he had a heart attack and died. So that's great. He was working right up to the last minute. And he was working, interestingly enough, on the Jewish Gnostic mystical tradition influence on Coptic Christianity and the Thomas tradition of Christianity, and how the early Kabbalah, Jewish inspired, and the kind of Christian Coptics were all one thing. And that was what the Thomas tradition was, And that's what Jung was talking about as well, really.
At Eranos, incredible, very, very extraordinary people and interesting discussions took place in that.
Right. But when did you? So, just to backtrack, right? That was. So you were born in 1943, and then you were educated in Milan.
In Milan, I studied physics. I chose the quantum measurement problem as my thesis, which is basically issues around understanding the description of quantum observations.
Okay, and this was at Milan University?
This was at Milan University.
Right. So this is like the Heisenberg paradox of you can't see it and measure it at the same time.
Well, it goes beyond that. It's difficult to summarize, but if I try to summarize it, it's like there is no consistent description of a quantum observation process without involving the notion of an observer and then implicitly consciousness. So it's like the separation of mind and matter is in crisis.
Was that your thesis topic?
My thesis topic was a particular approach to that, which later was just the beginning of it, which was later much developed and came to be known as decoherence approach, and is now the most widely shared approach to the problem, although I have later come to not like it and view it under a
you
different
look
perspective.
at it more critically now.
Yes.
Right. And was that thesis in Italian?
That thesis was in Italian.
Was it ever translated into English?
Not the thesis, no.
No. Was it published?
Yeah, it was
In
part
Italian?
of,
Yeah.
published in a scientific journal,
Right.
and it was considered an important thesis.
Right.
an important
Because there's a long
result.
tradition of physicists in Italy,
Yeah.
isn't there?
Yeah.
Fermi and people.
Yeah.
Who was your doctoral supervisor?
A Prosperi, Giovanni Maria Prosperi, a theoretical physicist from Milan. He was the head of what at the time was called the Milano School.
Okay.
And I guess that work then later opened me the door to come to the States, to go to California.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you work at CERN at all at that time?
No, I never had any.
You went straight to California.
Yeah.
And where did you work in California? What did you do there?
I worked in Santa Barbara
Right.
with Jim Hartle, who's a great cosmologist and astrophysicist.
Right.
Who's worked much with Stephen Hawking in later years.
Okay.
And we were involved in the first observation of a black hole.
Oh wow.
Or in what?
What year was that then?
That was 73,
Okay.
1973. And up to that time, the notion of a black hole was a theoretical
Sure.
prediction from Einstein's theory, which, since the Einstein theory was quite strongly confirmed from many sides, people
Right.
took it seriously. But from there to actually having
Evidence.
physical evidence of
So what evidence did you get for the black hole? When you say observing a
actually,
black hole, it's a paradox, isn't it?
yeah, it came from the observation of the object that was called Cygnus X1, which the X1, the number one
It's a star.
X-ray source
Right.
in the Cygnus constellation,
Oh, okay.
which was a double star
Okay.
with an invisible companion. One star was visible,
Right.
and but the mass of the invisible companion could be deduced from the motion
Okay.
of the system.
Right.
And basically the work that Jim and I did was showing that the maximum possible theoretical mass of a star, a neutron star would be in that case,
Right.
was smaller than the mass that could be deduced from observation. So this object would not fall into any possible category except a black hole. And that was the first.
So what are you saying, that one of these binary stars was actually a black hole?
Yeah, right. It was a black hole orbiting around the star, the two orbiting together.
I didn't know black holes could move.
Oh yeah, oh yes.
Really?
They're like they're like stars.
Really?
Yeah.
But surely, I mean, I'm just, I'm an amateur when it comes to cosmology, but I've studied it in some detail and I'm fascinated by it. I thought the whole point of a black hole is it's such immensely dense that it sucks everything in immediately, including light.
Yes.
That nothing can get
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
So it's got a
correct.
huge gravitational attraction field.
Yes.
Like if you drop a pencil in space a million miles away, immediately zip,
Well,
it
actually,
goes in the black hole.
Yeah, that's
So surely this
No,
other star thing
not
should
really,
have
not
immediately
really.
zipped in.
No, because it's like the immense gravitational field or distortion of space-time in Einstein's memory
Right.
happens in a very small area. Let's say if the sun would become a black hole, it would have a radius of 1.5 kilometers.
And so the gravitational pull
The
is not felt outside.
Let's say
there.
exactly.
Really?
If the sun became a black hole in this moment,
We
Well,
don't want that. So
we don't want
like
that
you,
because
no.
we like the light.
Yeah, sure. And the warmth.
We would have no light.
Yeah.
But as far as gravitational attraction, we wouldn't feel any different.
Really? Okay.
But
well, I'm
near
surprised
that
at
1.5 kilometer,
Mm.
that's a
Then
different story.
it's a horizon. That,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Is that generally accepted?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
all
yeah.
black hole specialists, they all say
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's
Oh, right, okay. And you were the first guy, you and this guy, Jim Hawken. How do you spell his?
Hartle.
Hartog.
Jim Hartle. Hartle.
Oh, okay, Hartle. Was he American or?
American, yeah.
Right. So you were the first guys to actually nail one of these black holes.
Well, no, actually we gave a key piece of a theoretical argument which had many sides and many people working on.
Okay, you were part
So
of.
we're part of clinching the thing, but
Right. It must be fascinating to do that kind of work.
yeah.
In
Actually, when I went to Santa Barbara, I was first working on solid state physics for a few months, which
Right.
has kind of a field with many practical applications like computer chips and stuff and things like that.
right.
And I found it deadly boring. So one day I went to the department talk, and it was given by Jim, and he was describing the physics of black holes by describing the trip of a spaceship falling into the black hole,
Right.
and gradually calculating what people on the ship would see, what people far away of it would see, and I was totally caught. And
Okay.
next
So
day
you
went
jumped
to
into
him
that,
and
yeah.
Yes.
Want to
And
work
we
with
did.
you.
Yeah.
And that was University of California at
That's
Santa Barbara.
yes.
Yeah. And how long were you
Lovely
there?
place, surfing,
Right.
beautiful lagoon.
And in the 70s we're talking.
In the 70s.
Must have been
Great
paradise,
place.
really. Yeah.
Actually,
How long were you
yeah.
there for?
I went 5 years.
5 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that on secondment from Milan, or you just got a contract for 5 years? Did you have a
No.
base back in Italy still?
I still had a small, what do you call it, kind of research grant from Italy.
Okay.
But I was also paid first as research assistant and then as by
In Santa
the University
Barbara.
of California.
Right. Fascinating. And then, and your career might have just carried on in conventional line, and you might still be a practicing
Yeah.
physicist of some
Right.
sort.
But that kind
At what point did you kind of start to veer into metaphysics and philosophy?
I started veering already during my stay in California.
I suspected as
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
California has that effect on people. Yes. Well, was there any particular moment of veering?
There was one point which I identify as quite a change, which was it happened during a trip to Mexico,
Oh, okay.
and it was like kind of a personal crisis,
Right.
and that I was still a fairly straight scientist, and I was traveling there with my car, my camera, as a good tourist, and taking pictures,
Right.
and events actually took us on dirt tracks in the Oaxaca mountains and meeting indigenous people
Right.
and getting a feeling for their lifestyle and their world.
Right.
And suddenly my whole world seemed so stiff and so artificial and so boringly protected
Right.
that I kind of went into a self-hate state.
Gosh.
Which was really painful.
Like questioning everything you thought was important.
Yeah. Yes.
Were these the Yaqui Indians that Don Juan was connected with?
No, these were like more southern Indian, but and it's not that or at least I didn't meet any
Shaman type figures.
shaman.
Don Juan
wise
didn't pop out of a
person.
bush.
No, they were like very ordinary people, but that had on me an effect which is just as powerful. And the funny thing is that I was gifted with a sort of satori, or I don't know what. It's like after days of this kind of tormenting
You had a
spell.
breakthrough.
Yeah, suddenly the world was sparkling beauty, and I was in heaven.
Oh wow! This all happened in Mexico.
This all happened
Right.
in
Fascinating.
a small village, which has now developed quite a bit, but at the time was like 4 houses, called Puerto Angel.
Right. I don't know if there's ever been written, but it would make a great, like an intellectual history of the impact of Mexico on the USA. Because I know lots of people that explored consciousness, went down there, explored peyote. And also even the Beat generation, Jack Kerouac and co, they went to Mexico. Going to Mexico was a kind of metaphor for escaping the hidebound American thing, you know. And it's now a contested border where there's lots of immigrants trying to get to the States and the Americans are booting them out. It'd be really interesting. Have you ever come across that? Like an intellectual history of Mexico in the mind of America?
No,
You could do a chapter.
No,
It'd be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I'm reminded also of Antonin Artaud in his voyage to the Tarahumara country.
Okay, he went to me.
He went there.
Right. And D.H. Lawrence went there as well.
Yeah.
And I think Aldous Huxley.
Right. Actually, I was living in Isla Vista, which is where Huxley had been living
Right.
earlier in California.
Right. Because, of course, originally California belonged to Mexico.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, you probably know the story, but it was a Mallorcan Spanish Franciscan philosopher called Fray Junipero Serra, who was an expert in Raymond Lull's thought, who named the Californian missions and founded them all. San Francisco, Santa Barbara was named by this Franciscan philosopher mystic, who's one of my Raymond Lull is one of my intellectual heroes, because he was trying to work out how everything in the cosmos fits together into one pattern. So he's a kind of proto-scientist, but he unlike modern physics, he didn't exclude spiritual dimensions of being. You know, they're part of the pattern and can be looked at logically, he thought. He called it the great work. And I always think California's kind of a present to the world from Raymond Lull, as it were, and from, you know, God, ultimately. But, so what did you do? You went back to California and gave your notice in, or said, I want to study philosophy, or what? What happened?
No, when I completed my doctorate there, and went back to Italy, and for a few months I was working in the astrophysics department at Milan.
Oh.
But that's, as I think I told you before, it's like I used to go to my office and fall asleep every day.
Ah.
And
It wasn't
realized that
exciting.
things had been like shaken out at a deeper level, and just studying, and particularly studying in this like very narrowly defined way
Right.
that academia would allow, or that I was
At that time,
at that time that I was aware of,
Yeah.
didn't feel right.
Right. Didn't nourish the soul.
Yeah. So I started looking for a place in the country to create a commune.
Okay. Are we in the late 70s now?
We are, yes, 76, 77.
Yeah, I remember that time.
Yeah.
Those are good years. Yes.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing we used to do then.
Yeah. And we did create a commune.
Oh wow.
My girlfriend at the time had quite a bit of money, so we bought a big piece of land.
Wow.
With some rundown houses, and for a few years we were pioneers.
Oh wow. Where was this?
The houses,
up in
tilling the field.
Amazing.
This was in Tuscany.
Okay, yeah, it has to be. Well, Tuscany's God's country, isn't it? Beautiful. Yeah. I know Lucca a bit around there, Siena. Amazing. And did you dropped out of conventional science?
I dropped out of conventional science, yes.
Right.
Which my friend thought was crazy because not much was actually required of a university person there.
Yeah, lecturer. Yeah.
But still, I felt the price on another level was quite heavy.
Right. And did you? When did you get involved with the Eranos work? Was that much later, or was that around that time?
No, that was quite a bit later. I had started like some years later. I left the commune, which became like too structured for my taste.
Right.
It became an Osho center.
It became an
Osho center.
Right.
I also connected with Osho, but the organized structure didn't correspond.
You need the freedom. Sure.
So for a few years I did various odd jobs. Then I started translating books and working for a publishing house and being part of their editorial board.
In Italy?
In Italy, yeah.
Right.
The publisher, who's still a good friend of mine, he's quite a creative person and got very interested in what was happening at Eranos.
Okay.
And particularly in Rudolf's work on the I Ching, and decided to publish an Italian version of it.
Okay.
And dispatch me to Eranos to explore that.
What was the publishing house? Was it? No, I now.
It's called RED, R-E-D. It was a fairly small publishing house, but quite avant-garde in the choices.
Right.
We actually started series on various aspects of ecology, society, and which at that time were quite
innovative. In like early 80s by now, I suppose.
Yeah.
Right. So you were sent up to
so
Eranos to
eventually
spy.
I was sent to Eranos to spy.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be just a relatively simple job because Rudolf had already translated the I Ching into English. So I thought, well, all it needs is just translate it into Italian.
Take his text.
Take his text. And Rudolf said, no, that's not the way. We have to start from the original Chinese because each language has a different spirit, and we have to find the Italian connecting to the original Chinese.
Oh wow! And you didn't know any Chinese at that point?
I didn't know any Chinese at the time, so it became